I don't know. I assume it's first time running for office. That's right. I know you're filling a vacancy now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I did run for town council for Ward 3, which is my ward, in 2016. Lost a close election to Erica Gibson, which in retrospect was one of the probably the best things that ever happened to me because at that point in time, my wife was pregnant with Sadie, our oldest. And after, I clearly had no idea what I was getting into. Who does at that point in time?
Yeah.
But to try to imagine now having to do that in addition to my job, in addition to being a first-time parent is almost unfathomable to me. So, and she would still probably call me a little bit crazy for doing this run, but you're correct. I was appointed to fill Mary Daniels' seat. Mary was a local lawyer practicing around this area who I knew a little bit professionally, not very well, but well enough. And we crossed paths, of course, around town, and had a little bit of engagement when I did run for town council in 2016. And to be honest, I don't know that had this opportunity not arisen, that it would have immediately come onto my radar that this is something I have to do. But, I was approached by several people who said, hey, we think you'd be a good fit here. Why don't you give it a shot? And so I threw my name in the hat, and along with 3 other very well qualified candidates, any of whom I'm certain would have served very well in my capacity. But I was fortunate enough to be appointed by the board, and I've really found that it's been a great experience. There's little doubt in my mind that one of the silver linings for me personally about this whole pandemic mess is that it's made it easier for me to transition into my role as supervisor. It has provided the flexibility to work from home, to attend my committee meetings during the week, to attend digitally when I need to, by Zoom, by phone, all things that just were not, even really remotely on my radar, as little as 9 months ago. And then the world changed, and our business slowed down a little bit, not tremendously, but sort of enough for me to gain a little bit of traction with the supervisor role, become involved, learn the ground strokes essentially. And I should mention, by the way, that I'd been on the Berryville Area Development Authority for 4 years before that. So I already knew I had taken the planning class that's put on by the Virginia Association of Counties and become a certified planning commissioner. So I was already attuned to the planning of it. I became familiar with town and county staff. And that is a lot of what local politics is. It's community planning. It's meeting short-term needs, but it's also creating long-term goals. It is balancing budgets. It's making sure that we have adequate funding for things like schools, like fire and EMS, like our sheriff's department, and the important services that without which we would just not be the community that we are. So to answer your question in a very long-winded politician-like way, yes, I am running for office. No, it's not my first time. It does in some sense feel like first time because it's first time in sort of this larger arena and stage. At the county level as opposed to the town level, but nevertheless, the same principles apply.
Right. So I don't mean to throw you like a curveball or anything, but it's probably not a curveball, but if you had to prioritize and don't speak to say the folks of the podcast is education, but that's not the purpose of this question. Mm-hmm. If you had to say like your top goal or top 2 goals, long-term, for Clarke County. Short term, there's plenty of things we got to think about. There's plenty of issues facing every community, right? But sure. if you are elected and you stay on the board, what are you thinking in terms of taking the long view? Like, what do you think would be important to try to do or start doing, lay the groundwork for over, say, the next 10 or 20 years? Like, think long term. Where do you see the community going in an ideal sense?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. A lot of community planning, it involves sort of looking forward in that 10 to 20 year range. We are very fortunate right now at this moment in time to have had folks like the ones who came before me, Mary Daniel, Mike Hobart, names like Pete Dunning before and during that time period, John Stalen, all of whom were savvy, smart community planners, as well as some of the current board members, Dave Weiss, Bev McKay, chief among them, who have been engaged in that community planning process for many years. They've sat on the planning commission, they've served on the board and in various roles on committees and such. And right now, I think we have such a solid, and I don't think I exaggerate when I say this, one of the paramount relationships between a town and a county, that is the town of Berryville and the county of Clarke. It is one of the top relationships and a relationship to aspire to at the statewide level, if not at the national level. And, when I went to this certified planning commissioner class that's put on by folks who come out of tech, and of course, I went to it in Northern Virginia. And so you got folks, I don't know, from as far south and west as like Shenandoah County. And then, of course, you got a lot of your Northern Virginia folks. And they say, oh, you're from Clarke County. Well, that's cool because, you guys really do it right up there. And it's true. We have a tremendous amount of cooperation between town and county. And the two sort of driving factors, I think, that we're going to see over the next, call it 10 to 20 years as our kids grow up here, are one, what I call the build out, the maximization of where these existing plans, and for those who are unfamiliar with this concept, the idea of what's called a comprehensive plan. These are community plans that are state mandated, and every community has to have one. And they do things like set broad stroke, long-term goals for community planning. And then they have their various component plans, like the mountain plan, the recreation plan. So they get more specific, and then, even diving down into further that, then you go to your actual Parks and Rec board. And of course, they have their own plan for what they want to do with the park, more specifically, another soccer field, another softball field, et cetera. So all these plans are broken down into very fine components by folks who really spend a tremendous amount of time and effort. Mostly, either they're paid very little for serving on these committees, or they just do it out of the good of their heart. And they put a tremendous amount of time and energy into thinking about how are we going to utilize our resources? How are we going to, make the best use of what we have, not only in this moment in time, but also moving forward. That's what planning is all about. That is a vast majority of what I think serving as a board member is all about. And so what we're going to see, I think, here is we have such a solid foundation based on the plans that we do have that were put together by these great community planners and thinkers that really are the generation that preceded us. I certainly hope when I say us that folks like you and some of my other contemporaries and former classmates and friends will get more involved, continue to become interested and involved in community planning, because it is important and you do have a say in it. I have found the town and county staff to be very bright, capable folks who are dedicated, and some would even say perhaps underpaid and overworked. Of course, that would be criticized by others who think that our county just isn't doing enough. But I would encourage them to become involved and really get to know what is done on a daily basis. And I think they will be impressed. And if they're not, they're missing the point. But what we're going to see is build out within our existing boundaries. That does not mean expanding out into the county. It does not mean pop-up housing developments. What it means is like the developments you see going up next to Martin's, across from Martin's right now behind the graveyard. Those plans, most people don't know, have been in the works for 20 plus years.
Yeah, I love, like, I've lived here for 8 years. Yeah. It is one of my favorite things when I hear people complaining, in like Facebook community groups. And I'm like, look, I know as soon as I open my mouth, somebody's be like, you've only lived here for whatever. I'm like, 8 years is at least a decent chunk of time.
Right.
And I'm like, and I know that has been on the books for a long time. Yeah. So if you want to at first say, well, I've lived here forever, and then turn around and complain about it, you have no one to blame but yourself for that detachment. Like,
I will tell you that by and large, the folks who tend to complain about that stuff, and look, they're within their right to complain for sure. Of course. Nobody likes the idea of bulldozers tearing up, what's basically your backyard.
Just shouldn't act like you're blindsided either.
Right. And I tend to find that those are folks who have been here for shorter periods of time, and the ones who have been here longer, either know or knew of, and now remember that, oh yeah, those plans were supposed to be developed before the recession hit, and everything got put on hold, and now here they come back because the economy is in fact coming back in some degree. So, and then of course, the pandemic hits and everything goes to hell. But we're going to see these build outs of sort of what I call the final phases that mostly has to do with Berryville. There are some other areas, Waterloo, and then out in Dinosaur Land area, Double Tollgate, throughout the county. We're not going to see, not on my watch, and I don't think on the watch of anybody who currently serves on the board or would even be interested in it. We're not going to see, rampant expansion or growth into the county. None of us want that. But the stark reality I think that we face is that, as we have an influx of more people, because of course these houses are going to be filled with people, hopefully, and people with kids. And my hope is younger families, because not that there's anything wrong, but we are an aging population here in Berryville and Clarke County. It would be nice to have younger families with kids and come back and invest in their community.
And just real quick, like when I moved into the community, I looked into the schools and all this, and I saw, okay, they just built a new high school. I think the new high school was, I think maybe a year old, maybe not even when I moved in. And I'm like, okay, well, they built it, and I'm looking at the size, and I'm like, I don't think they built it big enough. I'm like, I know you're not filling it now, but you got to build it for the future. And then over the last few years, the school population has actually been slightly declining. And I'm like, all right, well, I mean, I may have misjudged the rate of growth on that, but every time a neighbor's house goes up for sale, I'm like, all right, we're going to get somebody for my kids to play with. And we keep getting retired couples. And I'm like, damn it, come on.
Yeah, I mean,
but
look,
I think that shift is coming, with new housing, the shift's going to come.
I do too. And again, I hate to keep saying the word pandemic because we've all had enough of that. But, I think that, if anything, has sort of woken people up with, hey, it's not such a bad idea to move out into the country where, hey, you have a little bit less contact with people. You're a little bit more removed. Clarke County has done just such a tremendous job, and all the credit in the world to our fire, EMS, and first responders out there who, do this day in and day out and are exposed to this stuff. And to see, the counts that we have, we just unfortunately had our first fatality in the last week, but man, we haven't, knock on wood, perhaps it's coming, but we haven't even hit 100 total cases yet over the last, whatever it is, 9 months.
Yeah.
That's so impressive when compared to, just everywhere else, basically. And my hope is it stays that way. And look, people are going to come. And there are plans to expand, the town by, if you look at the projections of the numbers, we're hover around 4,000 plus at this moment in time. I think the projections moving forward over the next decade plus are going to see us creep closer to 6,000. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. You see a lot of empty storefronts downtown, and you might ask yourself why. And I think the short answer is people aren't here to spend their money. Now, some of that, again, has turned around a little bit as people have become more insular as a community, and we're a little bit more reticent to travel out and go to Winchester and go to over the mountain. And that's great. I love shopping downtown. We eat downtown all the time. We like going down to the coffee shop and the farmer's market, then walking around the little shops and maybe we'll buy a few things or a toy for the kids or something like that. That's my ideal of what Berryville and Clarke County is a community that is self-sustaining and self-supporting. Do we need a few more people, particularly probably younger people who are not as inclined to maybe go to Target up there, even though it's so tempting up the road, or order from Amazon, and might be more interested in going to the farmer's market and then going down to Modern Mercantile, and then going out to lunch at the grill or something like that. Yeah. I mean, that's the short answer to me is get our younger people with families engaged and involved. And how do you do that? You can do it through the schools. You can do it through that sense of community, the idea that everything we have is right here. And as we build out, as we maximize our growth potential, not only in Berryville, but at the county writ large, I think we have the potential to become that. Are we there right now at this moment in time? I think the answer is no. And the empty storefronts downtown will tell you that. It doesn't. You've been here for 8 years. how many businesses have you seen come and go through that, just the downtown stretch right here?
Yeah,
they can't sustain.
It's too many. Well, and my wife and I have this talk all the time. You know, she's a dance teacher. She runs her own company, but she also works at Blue Ridge Studio for the Arts in town. You know, teaches some classes there and has been getting more involved in it. And she always says, you know, I'd love to open a shop or, you know, someday run my own studio or something like that. And I say, you know, and she's like, every time we drive by and she's like, oh, look, you know, hey, there's that opening. I'm like, no, because you need either a slightly, not big, a slightly bigger population. Slow growth, I think, is the key. Or you need to find a way to attract tourism. And that is easier said than done, though we do have some cool things going on in the area. And so you can't put any big bets on a sudden influx of tourists when you're not going to, you know, do some major, you know, construction project to build something new. We have cool stuff that brings people in, but that's you're not going to finance a county budget on that. And so, you know, you really do need a slightly larger population to take the pressure off some of those existing things. I just think that's the balance point, because I think you hear a lot of people who, if you're on the developer side or you own some land, you just want to go because you see the money in it. And I think a lot of other people want to hit the pause button and make everything freeze. And personal opinion, I don't want to speak for you. I personally think in a community like this wouldn't necessarily be the answer everywhere, but in a community like Clarke County, you know, a slow measured growth is probably the right thing, because you're going to see better support for your businesses. Your schools are going to do better. You know, a growth you can manage. No growth is not realistic, and fast growth is not something that's going to make people happy. So
that's exactly right. And that's, you know, the balance is the key that you hit. And I one of the things, you know, I think that's very tempting for folks, especially this day and age of very reactive politics in general, is you say the word growth, and it's, oh my God, you know, he wants to turn Clarke County into Loudoun County. No, you know, look around. You know, recognize what we have, recognize that we are going to need essentially more money. How do you get more money? Well, you get a bigger tax base with more people moving into the community, paying taxes, hopefully spending money in the community. That's how you do it.
Yeah, you need businesses. I mean, businesses are where you make your money. Businesses pay more for services than they receive, but businesses don't stay alive if people don't patronize them. So you need the population to support the business so that the business can turn around and support the community. And that's not an easy sell, though, to maybe somebody who's never done I haven't taken a planning course, but if you've never had that conversation or looked into it, that's not an easy thing to sell to someone. You have to talk through that chain of events. But I think, especially in a very small community, that's probably the only way you can do these things responsibly. Is you got to think about how all these pieces balance, and there's sort of a community homeostasis in play that I don't know how you do it, but hey, good luck.
Well, yeah, I mean, I certainly appreciate that, but and like I said, I think that we can give all the credit to the folks that came, you know, right before our generation. They have put us in a great place to succeed. You know, literally, they have set the tracks down. It's just for us to make sure that we don't absolutely, you know, go off the rails and wreck the train, so to speak. So that is, you know, being engaged as my current role as supervisor with the current members on the board, a lot of whom, you know, all of whom I should say have been here for a long time. You know, I like to see myself as the next generation coming up, and we need folks again like you who are engaged in the community. There are a few others of us, Willie Steinmetz, who ran for office back in 2016 when I did, and a few others who have interest in this kind of stuff. It's going to be incumbent on us to, you know, educate ourselves as to our history of, you know, planning and know where we're going and how we're going to get there. And then, you know, to manage this thing, you know, responsibly. As you said, responsibility is the key. And so that's something that I feel very strongly about. The bottom line for me is I want this place to be the place it was for my kids when I was growing up here. Fortunately, we have the tools to do that. They are right there at our fingertips. And I really look forward to guiding that through, and having continuity on the board, I think, is going to be important, because if you just keep getting new folks in there, you know, every 4 years, it's not impossible, but it's going to be tougher to keep that continuity, to keep that same train just chugging along. And we have it, you know, in a good place right now. And it's something I'm feeling very positive about. It is why, you know, I did decide to get back in and run this time around. and having done so and getting back engaged with the process has really opened my eyes to where we are, where we're going. And that's why I don't regret a moment of it.